There's another area of the world where archaeologists haven't looked enough. And that area of the world is the Amazon rainforest. It's about 7 million square kilometers in size. And there have been tragic clearances of the Amazon, as we all know. Terrible mistake to cut down old-growth rainforests and replace it with soybean farms to feed cattle so that we can all eat hamburgers. What a stupid decision, especially since rainforest soils are not particularly fertile, and they are fertilized by the fall of vegetation onto them. Once you remove the trees, you're in a place, that soybean farm is only going to last 10 years, then it's going to be useless. So the destruction of the Amazon is a huge mistake that human beings are making. We've still got 5.5 million square kilometers left covered by rainforest. And extraordinary evidence is beginning to come out of those 5.5 million kilometers. Not just that genetic signal that connects peoples of the Amazon to peoples of Australasia, but real archaeology. This is in one of the areas already cleared. And this is the work of Marty Parson and Sanasau Noloma and Alkeo Ramsey, who've been investigating what they describe as the Amazonian geoglyphs. And here we have a square with an embankment around it. And here we have a square with its own embankment surrounding a circle with its own embankment. It actually looks a bit like the henges that we find in England. It's very like Avebury Henge, as a matter of fact, in many ways. And this is where it's happening. It's in the Brazilian state of Acre. And it's the location of the principal geoglyph sites that have been discovered by 2019. There's another one. They're very geometrical, these geoglyphs. The circle enclosing a square or an oval enclosing a square are repeated again and again. And here we have these sort of curious little scallops taken out of a square and another circle. And Taquino is a massive site, 37 acres it once extended over. But its two principal squares still remain. The largest measures 210 by 210 meters. It's got two further squares internested within it. And the smaller square, which has been extensively damaged, measures 130 by 130 meters. The larger square is 40 meters wide and opens onto a causeway 1.5 kilometers long. And all this was happening in the Amazon thousands of years ago. So, keep in mind this redrawing of this site, Fazenda Colorada. Just keep it in mind for a moment. I'll come to why it matters. Fazenda Piranha and Severino Calazans are both oriented to true astronomical north, as are the Giza pyramids. And Severino Calazans on the right has the same footprint as the Great Pyramid of Giza, measuring 230 meters along each side, and is equally precisely aligned to true astronomical north. Now I'm going to talk a bit about ayahuasca, which is one of the great discoveries of the peoples of the Amazon. This is Shipibo ayahuasca art. And as you can see, part of the art of ayahuasca is geometry. It's filled with geometry. Anybody who's had an experience in a deeply altered state of consciousness, whether with psilocybin, whether with LSD, whether with DMT, which is the active ingredient in ayahuasca, will almost certainly at some point or another see geometrical patterns. They're very common in the early stages of the journey. And what is depicted here is visions seen under the influence of ayahuasca. And on the right here, we have an amazing painting by the late, great Pablo Amaringo, a great visionary artist, worked with ayahuasca all his life and was gifted as an artist. And he shows us something of the enchanted realm that ayahuasca can bring us into. And it's seen as literally as a portal. Ayahuasca is seen as a portal that takes us to the other side. I want to be clear that ayahuasca is very serious business. I've had 75 or so sessions with ayahuasca. I'm not in a rush to have my next. I want to dispel the myth at the moment that any hallucinogens are addictive, they are not. There are no addictive hallucinogens. Unfortunately, medical science is beginning to catch up with the fantastic potential, therapeutic potential of these ancient medicines. But ayahuasca is very serious business. It's going to make you confront truths about yourself that you might prefer not to know. You're going to go through a bit of a physical ordeal. You're going to vomit, you're going to have diarrhea. I mean, nobody's rushing to do that, you know. And actually just looking at the brew there just does make me feel a little bit sick. So you have to brace yourself for an ayahuasca experience. And another of Pablo's visions, we'll notice that there are creatures called therianthropes in this vision. Those are the body of an animal and the head of a human being, or it can be the other way around. It's from the Greek therion, which means wild beast, and anthropos, which means human. Again, these are very commonly reported, and I've seen them myself many times, in visions in altered states of consciousness. Entities are encountered, and often they take animal form or mixed animal and human form. And here the Tucano of the Amazon are particularly, their culture is particularly closely connected to ayahuasca. And here we see a Tucano shaman guiding his son through an ayahuasca experience, helping him navigate the infinite terrain of the other side. And in the other photographs, we see Tucano ayahuasca art, which again is reflecting the geometry seen in ayahuasca visions. I'm going to read this. This is from Gerardo Rachel Dolmatov, one of the great experts on Tucano. Although any member of the Tucano community may drink ayahuasca, the deeper mysteries of the brew are primarily the work of the shaman, whose responsibility it is to travel through the portal to the other side, whenever required to negotiate with powerful supernaturals on behalf of his community. Where matters of the greatest importance must be resolved, a group of payes will work together, consuming massive quantities of ayahuasca until they reach a point lying in their hammocks where they feel they are ascending to the Milky Way. The ascent to the Milky Way is not easily accomplished. An apprentice will hardly ever be able to rise immediately to this sublunary region, but rather will learn to do so after many trials. At first, he will barely rise over the horizon. The next time, perhaps he will reach a point corresponding to the position of the sun at 9 a.m., then at 10 a.m., and so on until at last, in a single soaring flight, he will reach the zenith. So, in summary, the shaman's visionary journey through the ayahuasca portal involves a leap, or after sufficient practice, a soaring flight to the Milky Way. Not the final goal. It's a way station. Beyond the Milky Way lies the entrance to the other world. And again, I'll quote Gerardo Rachel Dolmatov. It is said that the individual dies when he drinks the potion, and that now his spirit returns to the uterine regions of the beyond, only to be reborn there and to return to his ordinary existence when the trance is over. This then is conceived as an acceleration of time, an anticipation of death and rebirth. So ayahuasca is a kind of guide to the afterlife realm. It's a kind of book of the dead, not written in text, but in direct experience. And on the lower left there, this is the entrance to the other world, as depicted in Tucano ayahuasca art. So I'll bring you back to that diagram, that site at Fazenda, Colorado, that I drew your attention to. And I can't help noticing how similar this part of it is to the entrance to the other world, as depicted in Tucano art. There's much other research that supports this, that the Amazonian geoglyphs were connected to the same complex of death and afterlife beliefs that flourished in ancient Egypt and I'll come to this, and in the ancient Mississippi Valley in North America. So top left, this is a great Western ayahuasca artist, my friend Martina Hoffman. She's depicting some of the many manifestations of Mother Ayahuasca. This is generally how we in the West experience the entity behind the ayahuasca brew, who has harnessed the ayahuasca brew to access human consciousness. In some cultures, the spirit of ayahuasca is seen as male, not as female. That's particularly so amongst a few of the Amazonian cultures, but generally the spirit is seen as female. She's a shapeshifter. She can be whatever she wants to be. I'm just struck by the similarity to this Egyptian image from the right, the goddess Isis feeding Ankh, immortal life, to the pharaoh Seti I. And let's not forget, for more than 3,000 years, the ancient Egyptians put their best minds to work on the mystery of death. And we should not dismiss their explorations into what happens after death as simple fantasies, because there's 3,000 years of work went into those explanations. Of course, scientists don't believe in any survival of death. For science, which is focused largely on weighing, measuring, and counting, we're just biological machines. We got our consciousness. It's an accidental byproduct. It's an epiphenomenon of brain activity. We needed these big brains to compete in the jungle of the universe. And as an accident, our big brains gave us consciousness. The notion, therefore, that consciousness might survive death is abhorrent to most scientists, particularly to scientists like Richard Dawkins, who somehow knows that there is no life after death. How can anybody possibly know that? It's a great mystery. None of us know what's going to happen when we die. Maybe we just will blink out and there's nothing more. Or maybe there is something more, as many ancient traditions suggest. I think we should listen to those ancient traditions. Ayahuasca means the vine of souls or the vine of the dead, and does so for good reasons. There are many similarities in the ayahuasca journey to what we call near-death experiences in the West. A sense of encounter with those who have passed on, with deceased relatives, communicating with us. And very frequently and painfully, ayahuasca requires us to confront and question our own behavior during life. It puts us on the spot. She puts us on the spot. Look at your own life and look at it seriously. What have you done with it? And this is so similar to the ancient Egyptian view, which is expressed symbolically as the judgment of the soul. Here, in one of the tombs of the nobles on the west bank at Luxor in Upper Egypt, we see the deceased being ushered into what is called the Hall of Maat. This is the goddess Maat, and that feather that is her symbol that she wears on her headdress is the feather of truth and cosmic justice and harmony. The soul is brought into her presence and then confronts this scene, which is the weighing of the soul depicted here as the heart of the individual, weighed in the scales against the feather of Maat. You do not want your heart to be heavy with wickedness and to outweigh that feather. You want to be in balance with that feather from the ancient Egyptian point of view. Now, there are many moral aspects to the ancient Egyptian judgment scene. These guys up here are called the 42 negative assessors. And they're going to ask the soul 42 questions. And ideally, the soul should be able to answer no to every one of them. They include some of the 10 Commandments. Did you kill? Did you steal? Did you lie? Ideally, we should be able to answer no to all of them. But the ancient Egyptians knew that we are frail human beings. We will constantly make mistakes. We will constantly backslide during life. The point is, do we use this opportunity of life to make ourselves better people? Or do we waste that opportunity of life? So there's the scales, and there's the feather, and there's the heart. And over here on the right is the god Thoth, the god of wisdom, supposed inventor of writing, who's writing down the judgment on a pallet. Over here is Amit, the eater of the dead, those who have lived wicked, selfish, cruel, vicious lives. Their journey will not continue. They will face annihilation in the Hall of Maat. And sitting at the head of the hall is the god Osiris. I love this image that Santa photographed in the tombs of the nobles. The objective of the whole journey is that at the end of it, you should be able to look your own soul in the face and say, yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I committed errors, but I tried to put them right. And by and large, I did good. And there's another more fundamental question than any of the moral questions. And that question, it seems to me, is, did you get it? Did you get what we gave you the gift of life for, what the universe gave you the gift of life for? It's a precious opportunity to be born in a human body, to have the potential to explore consciousness in the way that we do. Did you get it, that you were given a privilege to be here? Or did you waste your time on frivolous pursuits and on production and consumption and on your ego and on accumulating material possessions? The ancient Egyptian pyramid texts are the oldest recension of what we know of as the Book of the Dead. These are carved on the walls of the 5th dynasty pyramid of Unas. That is the name of Unas there. That's his cartouche. And over there, this circle surrounding a star depicts the Duat. That was the name for the ancient Egyptian afterlife realm through which our soul would journey after death and be tested on the life that we've lived. And these are other recensions of the same ideas, the ancient Egyptian coffin texts, the Book of the Dead, the book of what is in the Duat. They seek to prepare us for our journey through the afterlife. I love this double exposure that Santha took. In the foreground is the pyramid of Unas with the pyramid text, and then on the second exposure behind we have the Great Pyramid and its neighboring pyramids. And I would suggest that what the pyramid texts and the books of the dead achieve in hieroglyphs and imagery, the pyramids of Giza and Acropolis manifest in 3 dimensions, because the Giza pyramids are not inscribed. So scholars agree that Osiris was identified by the ancient Egyptians with the constellation of Orion. The ancient Egyptians called that constellation Sahu. And he was viewed as the figure of Osiris in the night sky, ruling over the afterlife kingdom of the Duat. And the Duat itself was not underground. It was envisaged as being located in the sky between the constellations of Leo and Orion, with the great heavenly river of the Milky Way, the winding waterway, as its central feature. As you can see, the constellation of Orion stands beside the Milky Way. I want to pay tribute to the work of my great friend, Robert Bauval, the originator of the Orion correlation theory, which, of course, archaeology has completely rejected, largely because archaeologists just don't understand astronomy and don't want to. This is not the sky above Egypt in 4,500 years ago. That's the other problem. Because the skies constantly change because of a wobble on the Earth's axis called precession. The Earth is our viewing platform from which we observe the stars, so naturally the wobble changes our perspective on the stars. This is the sky of roughly between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago. And as the constellation of Orion crosses the meridian, we see that it's in the same pattern as the 3 great pyramids on the ground, and there, rising due east in that period, is the constellation of Leo, gazed at directly by the Great Sphinx, the Leonine Great Sphinx. So in the ancient Egyptian view, how does the soul of the earthly deceased ascend to the Duat? Well, it does so through a leap or a flight, just as the Tucano described. There are narrow shafts cut through the walls of the Great Pyramid, 2 of them in the King's Chamber, the so-called King's Chamber, and 2 of them in the Queen's Chamber. The Queen's Chamber shafts actually don't exit on the outside of the pyramid. The King's Chamber shafts do. And one of those shafts from the King's Chamber points directly at the lowest of the 3 stars of Orion's belt. And here's the mystery, because although the layout on the ground depicts the skies 12,000 years ago or so, this connection to the stars is indeed from the era of 4,500 years ago. I am not seeking to divorce the ancient Egyptians from the construction of the Great Pyramids. I think they were intimately involved. I think they were completing a much older project. I see platforms on the ground there going back 12,000 years and the work completed by the ancient Egyptians, who tell us how the knowledge was passed down to them from what they call Zep Tepi, the first time. So there's this leap to the heavens that involves the journey through the Duat in ancient Egypt. I'll just quote a few passages from a book that Santha and I published in 1998, Heaven's Mirror, concerning Mexico. Excuse me for reading, but my memory these days is not quite what it was 40 years ago. Very much like the ancient Egyptians, the peoples of ancient Central America located their netherworld in a region of the sky through which ran the Milky Way. For the Maya, the Milky Way was a particularly important feature of the heavens. They conceived of it as the road that led to their netherworld, Xibalba, which in common with other Central American peoples and with the ancient Egyptians and with the Tucano, they located in the sky. So here we have a study of Tatlan's major temples, and studied by Fernandez Cormac et al., man city of Butatlan, Guatemala, designed according to the celestial scheme reflected by the shape of the constellation of Orion. He's able to prove that all of Butatlan's major temples were oriented to the helical setting points of the stars in Orion, and he argued that the Milky Way, alongside which Orion stands, was thought of as a celestial path connecting the firmament's navel with the center of the underworld. So close to the ancient Egyptian idea. I'm not saying the ancient Egyptians brought it to Central America or the other way around. I'm just observing the connection, the similarity in this complex set of religious beliefs. Orion was extensively involved in Mayan rebirth beliefs, which described the constellation and specifically its three belt stars as the turtle of rebirth. In Egypt, as amongst the Maya, the stellar context involves Orion and the Milky Way. In Egypt, as in Mexico, a journey through the netherworld must be undertaken by the deceased. In Egypt, as in Mexico, religious teachings assert that life is our opportunity to prepare for this journey, an opportunity that should, under no circumstances, be missed.